This is Converge, a podcast from Convera. Come with us as we shape the future of finance.
Well, it is day one at Money2020. Welcome to the Converge podcast. We are back for our fourth Money2020 our fourth Converge at Money2020. Very excited to have a great guest join us as the inaugural guest for this year's event, Ari Redbord. We're super psyched to have you. He's with TRM Labs. Ari, give us a little bit of your background to help segue into sort of the themes we're going to discuss today. I think your story is really interesting, and that'll sort of shape the discussion as we go forward.
Yeah, no. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is definitely the coolest setting that I've ever been in for a conversation like this. This glass box outside this like very vibrant conference going on right now around us. Very, very cool.
Yep.
So I background wise, I spent about 11 years as a federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice, always working on that intersection between money laundering and national security, what I call threat finance. So terrorist financiers, sanctions violators, export control. Anytime bad guys were trying to use money to do bad things, that was sort of my jam. I then spent about 2 years at the U.S. Treasury Department, again, working on illicit finance issues, really overseeing the national security apparatus, or working in the office that oversaw the national security apparatus, OFAC, which is our sanctions regulator, FinCEN, which is the U.S. Financial Intelligence Unit. I did this crazy thing about 4 years ago. I left about 15 years in the U.S. government, joined a 8-person startup. We're about 220, 230 today. And it's been this just really, really incredible adventure. But what's the coolest part is I get to continue that sort of mission of working to build a safer financial system.
Awesome. Yeah. So at a high level, you combat, your company says that you combat crypto crime. Let's talk just specifically about crypto crime. How big of a problem is it? And compared to, fiat crime or traditional financial institutional crime, what is crypto crime, looking like these days? How big of a problem is it? And really, how are you looking at it? What sort of lens are you looking at it through?
Yeah, no, really great question. So in terms of the lens, we're a blockchain intelligence company. So we work with every 3-letter U.S. law enforcement agency, right? FBI, IRS, CI, DEA, Secret Service. And then globally, we work in the UK and Singapore and Japan and Korea. And law enforcement uses us as a tracing tool. They trace and track the flow of illicit crypto proceeds to stop bad guys. So if there's a ransomware payment, a ransom payment, the FBI or law enforcement uses us to track and trace those funds, hopefully to seize them back. Yeah. It's true of hacks and terror financing. And then we work with a lot of the businesses here today as a compliance solution. They want to make sure that bad actors are off of their platforms. Yeah. And look, it's a real issue, but I think any emerging technology is adopted pretty early by bad actors. But still, look, we put out a report last year that said about 0.6% of all activity within the crypto ecosystem is illicit, meaning the vast, vast majority is lawful activity. But we still have to work to stop that illicit activity because some of it is very, very serious. There was about 12 billion in scams last year. Those are real people losing real money, and is a huge problem, right? North Korea is attacking cryptocurrency businesses at alarming speed and scale, dealing about almost 4 billion over the last 5 or 6 years. That could be used for weapons proliferation and other types of destabilizing activity. So the problem is very real, but we also shouldn't over-index on the problem when the technology is being overwhelmingly used for lawful purposes.
It's good to hear that because there is such a hyper media focus on those unlawful cases. They make huge news, obviously. They stay in the news for a long time and they sort of shape the narrative around crypto. So it's good to hear. I want to talk about, you mentioned some of the institutions and businesses you serve. Obviously, your TRM is backed by some giants such as Amex, Visa, Citi, PayPal, some of whom are really sort of claiming their own stake in the future of crypto and blockchain by exploring various use cases. So tell us about sort of, did the TRM story begin from seeing this evolving need that was starting to build up in sort of among the large institutional clients who you would serve? And when did you identify the opportunity sort of evolve into what you are today, seeing that there was actually going to be major institutions dabbling in the space? Was that sort of the impetus, or did you have this foresight to know that day would come, and that's when you started sort of making your plans?
Look, I think we've believed in this ecosystem for a really long time. And we were a quintessential Silicon Valley startup, went through Y Combinator, and then sort of, grew from there. And I think one thing we've always really, really believed in is the future of the crypto ecosystem. And that means mass adoption, whether it's for payments, like so many folks here today. Ripple is, I think, right behind us right now. They use TRM, PayPal, and so many other folks here. And I think what we really learned very, very, very early, or understood very early, is if any of this is going to work, if we're going to enable faster, cheaper payments at the speed of the internet, compliance, anti-financial crime is foundational infrastructure. We have to keep bad guys from abusing these platforms. And large financial institutions are some of the most conservative, businesses in the world. And in order for them to really lean into this space, it's going to have to be safe, it's going to have to be secure, and it's going to have to be regulated. And I think that we believe that there are technology answers to all of those things, and blockchain intelligence, like TRM, is a huge part of that puzzle.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the unique aspects of blockchain-based transactions or crypto-enabled transactions. There's obviously unique inherent aspects that are very exciting for the future of how these can be used to put real financial assets on chain and improve processes, whether it's through programmability, finality, speed, transparency. All of these things are really exciting to the financial services community. So why are digital asset transactions on these rails still such a significant security risk? What are the things that in light of them being so potentially disruptive in a good way, how are they on the flip side also so perhaps worth a second look in terms of the unique security challenges that they can pose?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question, and kudos for the way you phrased it. I think you just nailed the sort of paradox there. I think that the promise of cryptocurrencies is cross-border value transfer at the speed of the internet. We can now send funds faster and in larger amounts than ever before, for remittances, for humanitarian aid, for payments. Our friends at Circle talk about this all the time, the ability to use USDC to send funds faster for really important issues in the world to help people. But on the flip side, who else likes to send large amounts of funds at the speed of the internet? Bad actors. So, but I think, getting to your question, the unique attributes of public blockchains, right? Traceable, trackable, immutable, allow us to trace and track the flow of funds in ways we never could in the traditional world. I was a prosecutor for over a decade, and I had cases involving bulk cash smuggling and networks of hawalas and shell companies and high value art and, Russian real estate. There's no TRM to trace and track those things, right? Those are opaque, transactions. And I think it's so important that we use technology to leverage those native properties of blockchains in order to do a better job at financial crime compliance than we ever have before. And I think that's what we're trying to enable, with our partners like Ripple, like Circle, like Coinbase, and others who are deep in the space.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, so we always have a buzzword around blockchain or crypto here at Money 2020. In June, I felt like it was tokenization. Now I feel like it's stablecoins, and there's some good reasons for that. Stripe's recent acquisition of Bridge is really drawing a lot of headline and a lot of buzzworthy news. And there's bills, of course, getting in front of the Senate and Congress, and use cases and transaction volume on stablecoins continue to grow and see really good traction. Do you think that this is showing us that this is an inflection point for sort of the beginning of integrating traditional finance and decentralized finance, and sort of this sort of a pathway to a trustworthy on-ramp for financial institutions to start using blockchains via stablecoins? How are you viewing this in the TRM lens?
I absolutely do, and it is so cool. I was thinking about that this morning. It was funny. I run a lot, and I was out on a run on the Strip this morning with some folks, and we were talking a little bit about.
I'll have to join you tomorrow.
Definitely, totally. And we do the TRM Running Club,
I love it.
Where all over the world. We've had the Singapore FinTech Festival made us an official event. We did it at ACAMS. Very cool. So this morning we were out there running. We were having this exact conversation. There's no cooler time to be at Money 2020 than right now. if you care about blockchain, digital assets, cryptocurrency. I was here 3 or 4 years ago, and the crypto businesses were here and we're sort of doing stuff. But PayPal since then has issued a stable coin. You have Paxos obviously doing what they're doing with PayPal.
These guys,
that's exactly right. And I think it's and your example of Bridge and Stripe is like just absolutely perfect, where you have fintechs and crypto businesses really, really coming together. And if I sit here for a few more minutes, I can think of probably 20 other instances of this that we've seen really, really recently. So I think what we're starting to see are larger companies, whether it's payments or in traditional TradFi, lean in here in a way that we didn't right post FTX and some of the other sort of really, really tough events in the crypto ecosystem over the last few years. And I think one huge piece of that is a degree of regulatory clarity globally, at least. I think in the US, we're still working on that. We can talk about that if it makes sense. But I also think safety, soundness, security, which obviously is where we fit in to the space. We work with the leading fintechs out there to do crypto compliance, to make sure when they are engaging with digital assets that they're not engaging with terror financiers and ransomware actors and other scammers. So it's really like, I think what we're seeing is fintechs get comfortable in the space. PayPal, Stripe, Shopify, like we're seeing this happen in real time, and it's so fun. So I think, yes, we're seeing that moment, the TradFi meets DeFi moment, and it's only going to explode.
Yeah. And obviously the explosion is sort of reflected by the increasing number of, like you said, increasing number of stablecoins that have been released and are going to be released soon. How do you, from the TRM standpoint, look at sort of those various stablecoin, use cases and options out there? What differentiations do you make between them? And if a consumer, or a business is looking at different options for stablecoins out there and thinking about, how are these defined in the market? And obviously competition breeds better choices for consumers and businesses. How are you viewing the future of stablecoins? Will they continue to proliferate? Will there be a few winners or a few, mainstreams and some that are more fringe? How do you view the stablecoin future ecosystem if you had to take a guess right now?
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Speculative, highly speculative.
I've been wrong at least 3 or 4 times a day in this space for the last 5 years. So take this with a grain of salt. But no, I do believe that there will obviously be some winnowing out, right? In the token space, beyond stablecoins. But I'll get pretty specific with you. On this answer. We work with the leading stablecoin issuers, and they are very, very focused on ensuring compliance and financial crime, compliance and investigation within their ecosystems. Circle has really, really leaned in. When they issue USDC, they are a highly regulated with, one of the best compliance teams in the space. They have investigators. They have a great policy team, really, really sharp and really, really, really laser focused on this. First MiCA, the market in crypto assets legislation out of Europe. They're the first MiCA compliant stablecoin issuer, and do an absolutely fantastic job of ensuring not just that their platform is safe, but that the broader USDC ecosystem is safe. And that is absolutely critical. And they're very close friends and partners that we work with. We recently announced a partnership with Tron, the blockchain, and Tether, USDT. We call it T3, TRM, Tether, and Tron. And really what we're doing is we've created a financial crime unit that we have investigators at TRM working full time, working with investigators at Tether. Obviously, and really it started because we wrote a series of reports that said there's an overwhelming amount of illicit activity in the stablecoin Tether on the Tron blockchain. And they reached out and said, "Hey, let's solve this together." And that's what we're working on right now. So I would say that hopefully that at least in part answers your question. But I think that the key here is, look, if you're going to issue any asset today on a blockchain, you need to make sure that you do it safely, securely, so it doesn't get into the hands of terrorist financiers and other bad actors. And it's interesting. I spoke a few months ago at a Solana hacker house. I mean, it was crazy. I was the only guy in a sport coat, for at least 3 miles around this thing.
Imagine.
Yeah. And it was just it was such a cool group. And there's probably 600-800 people sitting there. And I said, look, I deeply care about national security issues. I was a national security prosecutor, right? North Korea and terror financing and ransomware and these really, to me, which are absolutely existential threats. But I said, even if you don't, if you just care about this ecosystem, if you want crypto to grow and flourish and more blockchains, more assets, right? We have to stop these bad guys, because if no one is going to put their funds on a bridge, on a protocol, in an exchange, if they think it's going to get jacked by North Korea, the second they do so. So I think we're all in this together. And that's definitely been the message from, firms like Circle and others in the space, that like, hey, we want to build safely, we want to build compliantly. And it's cool to see. And I think that's the future of crypto.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. And I think it's great that companies like Circle have a TRM Labs to partner with on this, because I'm wondering, governments obviously have raised their eyebrows at stablecoins in the past, years, but now it's becoming a little bit more almost like acceptable on the roadmap, because they're seeing how regulations can sort of create a stable environment for them. But do you think that privately managed stablecoins like USDC or RLUSD are going to be sort of in the eyes of the authorities as secure, as sort of trustworthy in the global financial system as, let's say, compared to a CBDC? Like, how do you think governments and institutions will look at the differentiation between launching a CBDC versus having a privately owned stablecoin? Is it a matter of just getting the right regulatory environment and then they'll all be one and the same, or will there be sort of like a different preference based on regional preferences and government regulations in various areas?
I think we're moving towards a tech-focused, 24/7 open banking kind of narrative for financial services, where people want choices.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, if I look at the space back 5 years from now, one thing I really, really do believe is it's going to be about choice, right? You can use USDC, you can use potentially CBDC, depending on where the Fed goes with that. I think that right now we're years and years away from actually issuing any type of CBDC.
Sure.
Look, this may be a semi-controversial view, but I think CBDCs, if done right, if democratic principles are baked into them, privacy and security, I think it's just better payment rails potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the Fed, if they could do this right, can do this. But I think stable coins will play a really important role. I think cryptocurrencies, look, Bitcoin, as a store of value, Ethereum for all the really cool stuff that you can do in terms of building and NFTs. So I'm excited for the choice. I mean, I think there's one narrative. I testified about a year ago before the House Financial Services Committee, and the question was around, like, are stable coins or crypto or digital assets sort of a threat to US dollar dominance in the world?
Yeah.
And my answer is absolutely not. It's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
99% of fiat-backed stablecoins are the US dollar.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about tokenization. The only thing that has been successfully tokenized today is the US dollar, right? Like, I think that this is spreading our values and our principles, as long as it's done right, all over the world in a really cool way. Places where banks and TradFi can't reach, right? The unbanked corners of the world. We could put USDC into those people's hands. That's an incredible opportunity for the US if we do it right, if we ensure that we're building here.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's great. So let's go back to MiCA, markets and crypto assets, the regulation that you mentioned earlier in Europe, which has begun its rollout. And do you anticipate this sort of shaping the frame for future regulations in the US and perhaps other regions? I mean, several regions are well ahead of the US in terms of regulations, not obviously including Europe with MiCA. What do you see MiCA becoming? Is it a blueprint? Is it more than a blueprint? Is it really sort of going to be the standard bearing sort of set of regulations, do you think, going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had Peter Kirstens, who's sort of the father of MiCA, on TRM Talks a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him that exact question, like, have you had regulators globally coming to you and saying, like, how did you do this? How were you thinking about it? And he said, absolutely, right? He travels the world talking about this, but blueprint, I'm not 100% sold on. I do think that, like, we're seeing a lot of consistency across global regulation, whether it's VARA, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in Dubai, whether we're talking about JFSA in Japan or MAS in Singapore, even in the UK, we're seeing consistency, but I think that every jurisdiction is a little different, right? I think risk tolerance in Japan is going to be a little bit different than risk tolerance in Europe and the United States. So we'll see sort of how that, and when I say that, I mean, I think Japan has less risk tolerance than these other countries do. But I do think MiCA is an incredible start to really, really building a comprehensive framework for digital assets, particularly stablecoins. And if you, I talk to my friends in Europe all the time, regulators, policymakers, and they believe that MiCA is a business advantage for Europe today. They believe that companies are now coming, they're building there, and it's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Look, when it comes to the U.S., look, I think that because of the U.S. dollar, because of our sort of economy, I think we're playing from ahead, right?
Yeah.
We're starting ahead. Now we'll see. I think the rest of the world is catching up. And if we don't really, really provide regulatory clarity for crypto businesses, and when I say regulatory clarity, I mean sort of addressing this question like who should regulate the space, right? Like, MiCA talks about how we should regulate. In this country, we haven't even gotten to who should regulate yet.
Yeah.
So is it the CFTC? Is it the SEC? Exactly. Is it a security? Is it a commodity? So I think that's what we need an answer to. But just to be totally clear, in our world, it's actually pretty easy in my sort of TRM lens.
Yep.
And that is, look, if you are a crypto business, if you're an exchange, if you're a broker, if you're a dealer, you're a custodian, if you're pretty much anyone who's at Money2020 right now, you're an MSB.
Yeah.
So you have those, you already have that. There's regulatory clarity for anti-money laundering, financial crime compliance.
Right.
It's all this other stuff that's a mess. And we'll see how it plays out over the coming months.
Yeah. And if you had to guess, you say coming months. Do you think this is really short term that we're going to see some big changes?
No.
No,
I wish. And smarter people than me have said that it will be faster.
Yeah.
I struggle with seeing it. Like, we got two bills, a stablecoin bill and a market structure bill, voted out of committee, and we're all spiking the ball on our own 20-yard line. It's like, guys, like you realize that we got to get to the floor, the House floor, get to the Senate, who isn't tracking any of this, and then get it to the president. Like there's just, I run marathons. It's like, I feel like we're mile 5, mile 8.
Yeah.
I feel like we're early when it comes to really getting something through. But I would say that there's been a lot of really good work by a lot of really great people to get us to mile 5, mile 8 right now. Yeah. And the hope is that you can kind of really push through over the next, year or so.
Yeah. I hope so too. That's great to hear. To close things out, I just want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how you advise businesses who are getting into the blockchain digital asset space. Maybe you can share some insights from a recent conversation you shared on your own podcast, where you spoke with crypto's first bank, I quote you, Anchorage Digital, which was the first bank in 2021 chartered to custody digital assets. What are some learnings from that conversation that businesses could take away in terms of developing a real practice around custody and use of digital assets, if we can just go a really high level and talk about some of those things?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question, and I really appreciate it. It was a TRM Talks with Rachel and Drika, and she's one of my favorite people in the space. A, because she's like really cool and a really fun interview, and we had a great time. But also, she's a business person, right? She's running operations globally for Anchorage, which is the first OCC chartered crypto bank.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's a compliance person, so she really, really understands the point, the role of building compliance as critical infrastructure. So, hey, they wanted to build a crypto bank. But and they're one of our oldest clients because they wanted to do it very early and ensure that compliance was critical infrastructure there.
Yeah.
And that really is always my advice. Like, you don't have to be Anchorage or Coinbase or Binance, Kraken, in order to build with compliance first, right? You can be a tiny DeFi protocol, but understand that, look, it's not going to go well if sanction actors are accessing your platform.
Yeah.
And, the cost that you have to spend on that today really hurts, I know, when you're building and when it's early. But man, the ramifications of not doing it right can be really, really rough later. Just ask really any number of companies in our space.
Yeah.
So I would say that, look, like day one, there are so many great lawyers out there. There are so many great compliance professionals. There are so many great folks who can advise. But compliance, regulatory stuff, it's critical infrastructure, and just go out and do it right.
Yeah, great advice to end on. Go out and do it right. There's a way to do it right, and everyone should do it that way. Ari, this was such a fun conversation to start things off here at Money2020. Thanks for being our first guest. And
hey, this is amazing.
Hope to have you back in the future.
Love it. This couldn't have been more fun. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.